Tanya Weber, a bright and compassionate 17-year-old, was the pride of her family and a role model to her younger siblings. She had her whole life ahead of her, filled with dreams and ambitions. But on June 26, 1965, all of that was cruelly taken away, as she was found strangled and hidden just blocks from her home. With twists, setbacks, and an unexpected breakthrough nearly 60 years later, this case is a chilling reminder of how justice, though delayed, can still be served. Tanya Weber was born and raised in the quiet, picturesque town of Logan, Utah. Growing up, Tanya played a crucial role in her family as the eldest of 5 children. Her siblings, especially her younger sister, Rhonda Weber Christensen, looked up to her as a role model and confidant. Tanya attended Logan High School, where she was a senior in 1965. As graduation approached, Tanya looked forward to the next chapter of her life, filled with optimism and excitement about what the future held. On the morning of June 26, 1965, the lifeless body of 17-year-old Tanya Weber was found on Logan's West Center Street, hidden in the bushes of a nearby home. The discovery was made just 2 blocks from her family's house. Tanya had been strangled, and her body was found partially naked. Aided by state authorities, embarked on a massive effort to uncover any leads. Over the course of the investigation, officers interviewed approximately 1,000 people, casting a wide net in hopes of finding someone who might have seen or heard something that could break the case wide open. Out of the extensive list of interviewees, police managed to gather statements from 150 individuals who had potential information related to the crime. These statements were meticulously analyzed for any clues that could point to the perpetrator. As investigators combed through the evidence, they also focused on the physical evidence collected from the crime scene. Among the items collected were Tanya's clothes, which were carefully examined for any forensic evidence that might lead to a suspect. The investigation took a significant turn several days after Tanya's body was discovered. Based on the evidence and witness statements, the Logan police were able to identify a suspect, 26-year-old Owen Hodges Kimball. While some believed the police had found their man, others were skeptical, unsure of whether the evidence against him would be enough to secure a conviction. The investigation into Tanya's case now intensified. Witness statements collected during the investigation suggested that Kimball had been seen near the scene around the time of Tanya's demise. This crucial detail seemed to place him at the heart of the crime, raising suspicions that he might have been involved in the tragic events of that night. For the investigators, it was a lead worth pursuing, and they focused their efforts on building a case against Kimball. However, the case took a sudden and unexpected turn just days later. On June 30, 1965, Kimball's family reported him missing, raising alarms among both his loved ones and the authorities. The search for Kimball ended in Logan Canyon, where police discovered his lifeless body inside his car. The scene was grim, and it quickly became apparent that Kimball had taken his own life. With the prime suspect now deceased, the police faced a significant setback. Despite the statements placing Kimball near the scene, there was no concrete evidence directly linking him to Tanya's case. The lack of definitive proof meant that no additional suspects emerged and the investigation began to stall. For 59 long years, the case remained cold. In 2022, after nearly 6 decades of uncertainty, the cold case was reopened. The Logan Police Department, determined to bring closure to the long unsolved case, sought the assistance of the Assault Kit Initiative grant. With this funding, they sent Tanya's clothing to the Utah State Crime Lab for advanced DNA analysis. The examination yielded a significant breakthrough, the discovery of DNA from several men on her clothing. The revelation of multiple DNA profiles led investigators to consider all possible sources, including the long-deceased suspect, Owen Hodges Kimball. Although Kimball had passed away by taking his own life in 1965, his remains still held the potential to provide crucial evidence. Investigators made the decision to pursue a DNA sample from Kimball's body, believing that his DNA could be the key to solving the case. To proceed, they needed legal authorization, so they filed an ex parte order, a court request granted with only one side's approval, allowing investigators to act swiftly without delay. The court approved the order, and on November 2, 2023, nearly 60 years after his demise, Kimball's body was exhumed. His remains were sent to the Utah Medical Examiner's Office, where DNA samples were collected for analysis. The samples were then processed by both the Utah State Crime Lab and the Bode Technology Group. In June 2024, the results were conclusive. Kimball's DNA matched the DNA found on Tanya's clothing, providing the crucial link investigators had long sought. With this groundbreaking evidence in hand, investigators revisited the numerous statements and physical evidence collected during the original 1965 investigation. The newly obtained DNA evidence, when combined with the historical findings, painted a clear and indisputable picture of what had transpired that fateful night. It became evident that Kimball was indeed responsible for the brutal slaying of Tanya Weber. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and had he been alive, it would have been more than sufficient to obtain a guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. The conclusion of the investigation brought long-awaited closure to Tanya's family and the community of Logan. The truth had finally emerged after 59 years, bringing an end to a case that had haunted the town for generations. When police located them and told them what took place, Rhonda explained, "The policeman came in and asked for my parents. They took them outside and told them what happened. There was a lot of support from our extended family. Words cannot express the gratitude from myself, my sister Julie, and my brothers, Stephen and David. We are just so grateful to believe that she can finally rest in peace." When Stephen Weber, Tanya's brother, talks about June 26, 1965, he still gets emotional. He was 10 years old, but remembers the day like it was yesterday. He said, "It was just really terrible. I just did not know quite how to handle it." He gave a big sigh of relief when asked how important it was to have his sister's perpetrator officially named. Stephen added that he has forgiven him, and he hopes this can bring closure to others close to the case too. Lieutenant Lemuel Earle was one of the lead investigators on the case all those years ago. He has been retired 24 years now, but said it was a case he could never get out of his mind. Earle said getting that call on the 59th anniversary of Tanya's demise was a personal payoff. "I cannot tell you how much peace of mind I have. It took a lot of good hard work and effort, not just back in those days, but fellows today that stuck with it." Shaina L Waller, a 26-year-old from Bell County, Texas, was a beacon of kindness, known for her generous spirit and the love she radiated to everyone she met. But on January 29, 2011, the light that Shaina brought into the world was brutally extinguished. The investigation that followed was filled with twists and turns. But after more than a decade, a breakthrough finally brought long-awaited answers. Shaina L Waller was a loving daughter, cherished by her family for her unwavering kindness and the deep care she showed to those around her. However, beneath the surface of Shauna's seemingly perfect life, there were struggles and challenges that she kept hidden from those around her. Despite her cheerful exterior, she faced personal battles that weighed heavily on her heart. The pressures of life began to mount, but she remained resilient, determined to overcome whatever obstacles came her way. Then, on January 29, 2011, everything changed. On that fateful day, the life that Shaina had so carefully built began to unravel. The body of 26-year-old Shaina L Waller was found discarded in a ditch along Quarry Road. A young woman's lifeless body, partially wrapped in a light green bedsheet, drenched in blood near her head. The eerie scene was made even more disturbing by the presence of a single rubber glove stained with blood lying nearby. Authorities immediately launched an investigation determined to uncover the truth behind Shauna's untimely demise. The discovery of the rubber glove suggested that the perpetrator had taken some steps to avoid leaving behind incriminating evidence. Yet there was hope that this clue might lead investigators closer to identifying the perpetrator. On June 30th, 2011, months after her body was discovered, the results of her autopsy were released. The report confirmed what investigators had feared. Shauna's demise was a brutal slaying. She had suffered multiple stab wounds all over her body, with particularly vicious injuries inflicted on her neck and abdomen. The sheer violence of the attack shocked even the most seasoned investigators, revealing the depth of the rage and malice behind the crime. Each new piece of evidence brought the investigators closer to the truth, but also deepened the mystery surrounding Shauna's final days. Despite the relentless efforts of the police, the case went cold, leaving her family and the community without answers for over a decade. In 2022, the Bell County Sheriff's Department made a surprising announcement. The cold case of Shaina L. Waller's had been reopened. Lead investigator Corey Powell, who had taken a personal interest in the case, spearheaded the renewed investigation. The passage of time had not diminished the department's determination to find Shauna's perpetrator, and advancements in forensic technology provided new tools to re-examine the evidence. The key to solving the mystery lay in the Texas Department of Public Safety, which had generated a DNA profile from the evidence collected at the crime scene back in 2011. The breakthrough came when the DNA profile was entered into the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. After years of searching, a match was finally found. The DNA evidence pointed to a 56-year-old man named Alvin Dwayne Canton. The revelation was shocking, as Canton had never been on the radar of investigators during the initial investigation. With this new lead, detectives moved quickly to track him down, knowing they were closer than ever to solving the case. When confronted with the evidence, Canton consented to a blood draw, further confirming the match. The DNA found at the scene, particularly on the blood-stained rubber glove, was a crucial piece of evidence that tied him directly to the crime. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the glove matched both Shauna's and Canton's DNA, leaving little doubt about his involvement in the crime. The discovery brought a sense of closure to the investigators, who had worked tirelessly on the case, as well as to Shauna's grieving family. Canton's arrest on March 6, 2024, marked a turning point in the long search for justice for Shaina. After 13 years, the persistence of law enforcement and the power of modern forensic science finally provided the answers that had eluded them for so long. Lead investigator Corey Powell said Shauna's mom was crying with excitement at the news of Canton's arrest. He said, "Being able to make the call to Shauna's mom, it is just overwhelming when she says, 'I did not think this call would come because it has been 13 years. The excitement that she now gets to tell her family." Canton is now being held by the Karens County Sheriff's Department on a $1 million bond. He is awaiting his arraignment and extradition back to Bell County. Peter Michael DeSabatino, born on October 22, 1992, in Newark, Delaware, overcame near-demise experiences as a child to become a vibrant, outgoing young man. Known for his leadership on the lacrosse field and his deep love for family, Peter's life seemed destined for greatness. But on November 12, 2012, his bright future was stolen in a moment of unimaginable betrayal. His case remained a haunting mystery. Peter Michael DeSabatino was born on October 22, 1992 to Angela Herman and Thomas DeSabatino. He survived two near-demise experiences in his early years, first at birth and again at the age of 2 when he nearly drowned. At Appoquinimink High School, Peter's leadership and charisma shone through. As a co-captain of the lacrosse team for 2 years, he earned a reputation not only for his athletic skills, but also for his unwavering team spirit. Yet, there was more to Peter than just his athletic prowess. He was known for his mischievous nature, a rascal with a bit of spice to his personality. Whether it was a holiday celebration or a casual weekend barbecue, Peter thrived in the company of loved ones. However, on November 12, 2012, Peter's life took a dark and unexpected turn. That evening, Peter was at his apartment, enjoying the company of friends. The night seemed like any other, filled with laughter and the comfort of close companionship. But as the evening unfolded, Peter received a text message that would change everything. The message was from someone he knew, asking him to come outside and meet them. Trusting this person, Peter stepped out unaware that he was walking into a trap. What he thought was a friendly encounter was, in fact, a setup that would lead to his tragic demise. As Peter approached the meeting spot, the situation quickly escalated into violence. The peace of the night was shattered by the sound of gunshots echoing through the air. His friends, still inside the apartment, were jolted by the sudden, terrifying noise. They rushed outside only to find Peter lying on the ground, gravely wounded. Desperate to save his life, they attempted to resuscitate him, performing CPR and mouth-to-mouth, while others frantically dialed 911. The scene was chaotic, filled with fear and the gut-wrenching realization that their friend's life was slipping away. Emergency services responded quickly, with police being dispatched to the Studio Green apartments on the 200 block of Thorn Lane in Newark. When officers arrived just before 9:30 p.m., they found Peter lying on the sidewalk, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. The situation was dire, and despite the best efforts of the responding officers and paramedics, Peter's condition was critical. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the injuries he sustained were too severe. Tragically, Peter DeSabatino lost his life as shortly after arriving at the hospital. For years, Peter's case remained an unsolved mystery. The New Castle County Police's Cold Case Unit took on the burden of keeping his case alive. The unit highlighted cases like Peter's to remind the public of the enduring pains suffered by the families left behind, who must carry on without answers or justice. Despite the passing years, the Cold Case Slaying Squad never gave up hope, tirelessly re-examining evidence and re-interviewing witnesses in pursuit of the truth. There was an interview with the family in 2020, and they had the following to say. Thomas D. Sabatino said, "He was a good kid, I was proud of him, still am, and I miss him very much." He expressed frustration at the case's current status and said more evidence is needed to help bring his son's perpetrators to justice. "It has been almost 5 years and we know who they are, but there just is not enough evidence to give them what they deserve." His sister, Caroline, said, "He just was happy to be alive. How could my baby brother be gone?" His mother, Angela Herman, described the waking nightmare of having to both learn of her son's demise and then tell his sisters Peter was gone. She said, "I just kept thinking, when I get there, somebody's going to take me in and show me that he is okay. They did not. When I got there, they took me back to another room. After they told me, after the girls came in, we had to tell them. Officials let us see him, but because it was a criminal case, I could not even touch him. I could not hold him one more time. I could not even hold his hand." The persistence of the investigators finally paid off in January 2024. The investigation reached a critical turning point. The Cold Case Slaying Squad, in collaboration with the Delaware Department of Justice, made a breakthrough that would change everything. After carefully piecing together the evidence and revisiting key testimonies, detectives identified 33-year-old Alondo Dale as a suspect in Peter's case. This discovery reignited the case, providing the long-awaited lead that could finally bring closure to Peter's family. On January 16, 2024, the case was presented to a grand jury backed by the unwavering support of the Delaware Department of Justice. The evidence was compelling enough to secure an indictment against Dale, charging him with slaying in the first degree. This indictment marked a significant milestone in the investigation, signaling that justice was within reach after more than a decade of uncertainty and heartache. The pursuit of justice culminated on January 29, 2024, when Dale was apprehended by the United States Marshals Task Force with assistance from the NCCPD Special Investigation Squad. He was subsequently arraigned in New Castle County Superior Court, facing the grave charges of first-degree slaying and first-degree slaying caused during the commission of a felony. Bail was set at $1 million and he was transported to Howard R. Young Correctional Institution. For Peter's loved ones, Dale's arrest brought a sense of relief and the hope that justice, though delayed, would finally be served. Maurice Wright, a 28-year-old father of three with a bright future, was a man known for his kind heart and unwavering dedication to his family. On October 7, 2017, while preparing for his daughter's birthday party, Maurice's life took a devastating turn that no one could have foreseen. The shocking events of that fateful day lead to years of unanswered questions and then a long-awaited breakthrough that finally brought hope. For justice, Maurice Wright was a 28-year-old resident of Bakersfield, California. A graduate of Highland High School, Maurice was a loving father of three who worked full-time to support his family. Life for Maurice seemed to be on a positive path as he worked hard to provide for his children and make their lives better. On October 7, 2017, Maurice's life took an unexpected turn. That day, he was busy preparing for his daughter's birthday party, a celebration that was meant to be filled with joy and laughter. After stopping at a local store to pick up food for the party, Maurice was ready to head home to finalize the preparations. The day held the promise of happiness, and Maurice, as always, wanted to make sure his daughter's special day was perfect. However, as he left the store, something unimaginable happened. Maurice, focused on getting home to his family, was unaware that this ordinary errand would be the beginning of a tragic chain of events. Around 8:30 p.m., Bakersfield police received a distressing call reporting a shooting near South King Street and East 3rd Street. Upon arriving at the scene, officers discovered two victims who had sustained gunshot wounds. The severity of their injuries ranged from moderate to major, indicating the seriousness of the situation. As first responders worked quickly to assess and assist the victims, the reality of the tragic event began to unfold. One of the victims' condition was critical. He was rushed to the hospital in an attempt to save his life, but the injuries proved too severe. Later that evening, the man succumbed to his wounds. It was not long before the identity of the deceased victim was confirmed, who had tragically lost his life as Maurice Wright. Maurice, a father, son, and friend, was now another statistic in the ongoing violence that plagued the area. His life cut short in a senseless act that left everyone questioning why. As the investigation into Maurice's slaying began, the Bakersfield Police Department immediately started gathering evidence and searching for suspects. Early on, authorities announced they were looking for three black males, who had fled the scene in a dark SUV shortly after the shooting. Despite their efforts, the case remained unsolved for years, leaving Maurice's family and the community without answers or justice. The search for those responsible continued, but leads were scarce and the case grew cold. In 2024, nearly 7 years after that tragic night, a significant breakthrough occurred. Two suspects were arrested in connection with Maurice's case, reigniting hope for justice. Jamie Dawson, 28, who was already in custody for an unrelated incident, became a key figure in the investigation. When questioned about the shooting on South King Street, Dawson initially denied involvement, but when detectives presented him with surveillance footage from the night of the incident, Dawson admitted to being one of the three suspected shooters. His confession marked a turning point in the long-standing case. Following Dawson's arrest, another suspect was apprehended. Trayvon Lee Foreman, also 28, was arrested in July 2024. He faced serious charges, including slaying, conspiracy, and gang participation in connection with Maurice Wright's demise. For Maurice's family, the news was bittersweet, a step toward justice, though it could never bring back the man they had lost. As the legal proceedings unfold, Maurice's memory will remain a poignant reminder of a life cut short by senseless violence and a testament to the enduring pursuit of justice. A person turned an ordinary diner into a sanctuary of warmth and friendship. But then the bonds forged in such a place were suddenly ripped apart. A beloved community figure is tragically taken away. For nearly 24 years, this tragic demise remained a mystery. Stephen Davis was a 46-year-old man who stayed in Pensacola, Florida. He was a cab driver for Yellow Cab Taxi. His regular presence at the local Waffle House was as reliable as the sunrise, and his easygoing demeanor made him a natural at forming connections with patrons and staff alike. The Waffle House had become more than just a diner for Stephen. It was a home away from home, where he forged bonds that extended beyond the clinking of silverware and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. On August 26, 1998, an ominous cloud settled over the once inviting Waffle House as news spread of the tragic events that had befallen Stephen Davis. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, Stephen found himself embroiled in a terrifying encounter that would forever alter the course of his life. As he approached his cab, parked in the shadows of the early morning, he was unaware of the menace lurking within the vehicle. A man, concealed in the darkness, lay in wait for Stephen, setting the stage for a horrific ambush. Sensing imminent danger, desperately attempted to flee from the assailant. As he bolted from the car, the attacker opened fire, and a hail of bullets pierced the stillness of the Pensacola night. Despite his frantic efforts to escape, Stephen was struck multiple times, once in the jaw and twice in his right posterior thorax, and his life hung in the balance. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Stephen staggered towards the nearby Winn-Dixie and refuge from his assailant. Tragically, he collapsed in the parking lot, his life ebbing away as the gravity of his injuries took their toll. The glow of the streetlights illuminated the gruesome scene as Stephen succumbed to his wounds. In the aftermath of the horrific attack, Stephen's car was discovered near Navy Boulevard, its driver's door and rear passenger doors left ominously ajar. The shattered driver's side window bore testament to the violence that had unfolded, offering a chilling glimpse into the chaos that had transpired. An immediate investigation was launched, with law enforcement officials working tirelessly to uncover any leads that could shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Yet, as the case progressed, it became increasingly clear that the lack of witnesses and physical evidence presented a formidable challenge. Despite countless efforts and the occasional tip, the passage of time seemed only to deepen the enigma of Stephen's case. The unwavering determination of investigators to bring justice to Stephen Davis and his loved ones culminated in a significant breakthrough nearly a quarter of a century after his tragic demise. In 2022, the investigation into Stephen's case was reopened, and through the utilization of a bloody fingerprint from the scene was meticulously examined. This led investigators to identify Donald Holmes as the prime suspect. At the time of this discovery, Holmes was already serving a 20-year sentence in a Florida state prison for a home invasion robbery that occurred in Escambia County in 2012. Initially set for release in 2032, Holmes now faces new charges for the slaying of Stephen Davis. This will ensure that he will be held accountable for the heinous crime. The announcement made by the Escambia County Sheriff's Office on March 5, 2024, brought a long-awaited sense of closure to Stephen's family and friends. The relentless pursuit of justice, coupled with the remarkable advancements in forensic science, enabled detectives to finally connect the fingerprint to Holmes, ultimately solving the mystery that had haunted the community for over 24 years. Stephen's sisters, Ruby Kastner and Julie MacArthur, said that he was known for being very friendly and helpful to anyone. Ruby said he was a big bear. He was there for everybody. He got a lot of people off illegal substances. As the legal proceedings against Donald Holmes ensue, the memory of Stephen Davis lives on. In a turn of events that has stunned both Los Angeles and Northern California, a cold case from 1984 has suddenly reignited public interest. Found beaten and lifeless in a Roseville alley, Meline Garcia's case went cold for decades, leaving unanswered questions that have finally found answers decades later. Meline Garcia, born in Chico, California to Spanish immigrant parents, lived a life rich in cultural heritage and community spirit. Growing up in Rockland and East Sacramento, California, she was cherished for her warmth and generosity. After marrying Frank Garcia, she made a home in East Sacramento, where she was known for her exceptional cooking, vibrant gardens, and creative crafts. In the late 1970s, Meline moved to South Placer, continuing her commitment to her community. She lived a quiet life, but at the age of 69, that life would be tragically cut short. On the morning of September 26, 1984, Meline Garcia was found in an alleyway on the 300 block of Atlantic Street. Meline, known for her early morning walks on her distinctive tricycle, had been collecting cans when she was attacked. A witness discovered her body partially concealed behind the West House Hotel and Saloon. The scene was one of unspeakable violence. She had been beaten with the ferocity of the assault so intense that her dentures were thrown from the scene. The police who arrived on the scene were confronted with a grim discovery, as her body also bore signs of an assault. In the wake of Meline's tragic demise, the Roseville Police Department launched an exhaustive investigation into her vicious slaying. Detectives canvassed the area, interviewing residents, and tracking down any potential leads. Detective James Fujitani and evidence technician Gary DeMille, one Dory, worked diligently at the crime scene, but progress was slow. The investigation was briefly redirected when a double slaying surfaced. And although Fujitani managed to secure convictions in those cases, Meline's case remained unresolved. Years passed, and as the case grew colder, new detectives like Kurt Leatherman and Mary Green picked up the case. Leatherman, in particular, made significant strides by aligning the evidence with advancements in forensic technology and clearing numerous suspects. But even with these renewed efforts, Meline's case remained unsolved, and the hope for resolution seemed increasingly distant. The breakthrough came decades later with advancements in DNA technology and investigative techniques. In 2024, investigators employed familial DNA testing. This technique revealed a match linking Richard Moore, a man with a history of arson near the crime scene, to the unsolved case. This new development prompted a renewed push to locate Moore, who had since relocated to Los Angeles. As the case was reactivated, the technology and persistence of investigators led to Moore's arrest on June 27, 2024. Moore was transported back to Placer County, where he faced charges involving the slaying of Meline Garcia, as well as kidnapping and assault. Neighbors who lived by Moore in a quiet Echo Park neighborhood said they were in disbelief over the allegations, with many saying the man seemed friendly and helpful. One neighbor said, "It has been a shock to learn that something so crazy is happening with someone who we live near to. He was always pretty friendly. I rode my bicycle by one time and he asked if I needed to air my tires." Moore's initial court appearance on July 8, 2024, was the beginning of the judicial process. Moore, who entered a not guilty plea, was appointed a public defender as the case proceeded through the legal system. His arraignment set the stage for a trial that would test the strength of the evidence and the effectiveness of the new forensic methods used to crack the case. As the legal proceedings continues, Meline's family and the Roseville community waits for a resolution. Terry Middlecopf, Meline's oldest granddaughter, said Moore's arrest was bittersweet. She said, "It is a bittersweet moment. I can only hope to my grandkids remember me the way that I remember her." The arrest not only brought renewed attention to Meline's case, but also provided a glimmer of closure after decades of uncertainty and grief. Dennis Leroy Wood, a 71-year-old man known for his gentle nature and love for solitude, lived peacefully in Moorpark, California. His days were spent in tranquility, a simple routine that provided comfort in his later years. But on April 16, 2004, Dennis' world was turned upside down in a way no one could have predicted. Dennis Leroy Wood's day that began as a seemingly ordinary day would soon spiral into a nightmarish event that no one could have predicted. But then deputies with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to his home on the 12500 block of Mountain Trail Street. The visit was part of a routine wellness check prompted by concerns from neighbors who had not seen or heard from Dennis in several days. The deputies approached the home, unaware that they were about to uncover a grim scene. As the deputies arrived at the property, there was an unsettling silence surrounding the house. The once cozy and peaceful home seemed eerily quiet, with no signs of life. After receiving no response to their knocks, the deputies decided to enter the residence. What they found inside was far more horrifying than they had anticipated. The lifeless body of Dennis lay in the home, who had always kept to himself, was found deceased from at least one gunshot wound. The discovery marked the beginning of a complex investigation. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office quickly ruled Dennis' demise as a slaying. Who could have committed such a heinous act against someone as harmless as Dennis? There were no immediate signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be stolen from the home, deepening the mystery surrounding Dennis' demise. Was this a random act of violence, or was there something more sinister at play? The investigation revealed disturbing details about the final moments of his life. It was determined that he had lost his life due to multiple gunshot wounds, with injuries to both his head and chest. Even more unsettling was the fact that Dennis' body had gone undiscovered for nearly 2 weeks. During that time, his home, once a haven of peace, had become the silent witness to a horrifying crime. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have had contact with Dennis in the days leading up to the slaying. They pursued every lead, hoping to uncover something that would point them in the direction of the perpetrator. But despite their efforts, the case remained a mystery. The detectives quickly realized that the case was more complex than they initially thought. There were no clear signs of a break-in, and nothing of significant value appeared to be missing from the home. The absence of an obvious motive made it difficult for investigators to identify a suspect. With no clear direction, the case began to stall. Over the years, the case of Dennis remained a haunting, unsolved mystery for the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. Investigators would occasionally reevaluate the case, hoping that advancements in forensic might shed new light on the crime. Despite their efforts, the case remained cold, with no significant breakthroughs. However, that all changed on May 14, 2024, when the Sheriff's Office made a stunning announcement. They had uncovered new evidence that allegedly linked a man named Nami to the slaying of Dennis. After 20 years of uncertainty, there was finally a glimmer of hope that justice would be served. Authorities were tight-lipped about the specifics of the new evidence, citing the ongoing investigation and legal proceedings. The details of how Nami was connected to the crime and the nature of the evidence remained undisclosed. This left many to speculate about what had led to this unexpected breakthrough. One thing was clear: the case had taken a significant turn. On the morning of May 14, 2024, Nami was arrested around 11 a.m. by Ventura County deputies. Nami was quickly transferred to the Ventura County Jail, where he now awaits charges for first-degree slaying. With bail set at $2 million, Nami remained in custody as the legal process began to unfold. The arrest of Nami brought a measure of closure to the 20-year-old cold case. For the family and friends of Dennis Leroy Wood, the news was bittersweet. A mix of relief that someone had finally been held accountable, and sorrow for the years of pain and uncertainty they had endured. In the quiet stretch of Seward Highway south of Anchorage, Alaska, a chilling discovery in 1978 marked the beginning of a decades-long mystery when the body of 16-year-old Shelly Connelly was discovered. The case eventually went cold, leaving her friends and family without closure until 2019, when forensic technology finally cracked the case wide open. Born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, Shelly Connelly was a lively and spirited teenager, with a penchant for adventure and a deep connection to her family. She was petite and often described as having an unassuming beauty. Her mother later noting that Shelly did not fully appreciate how attractive she was. Despite dropping out of high school, Shelly was eager to carve out her own path. She had a passion for beauty and personal care and was set to start cosmetology courses. At just 16, she was also engaged to a man in the military stationed at Fort Richardson. January 7, 1978 began like any other day in Anchorage, Alaska. The city was shrouded in a thick fog, and it would later become seared into the memories of those that knew Shelly, and a day that her mother, Judy Connelly, would replay countless times over the year. That evening, Shelly had plans to go out. She picked out an outfit that reflected her bold personality. And despite her mother's reservations about her going out dressed in revealing clothing, Shelly threw on a ski jacket her parents had given her for Christmas and made her way to Chilkoot Charlie's, a well-known Anchorage bar. Although underage, Shelly blended into the crowd of young adults who frequented the bar. During that time, it was a hot spot, the oil boom bringing in a surge of young men with disposable incomes. Shelly was seen leaving Chilkoot Charlie's later that night in the company of several men. Witnesses later reported seeing her at Leroy's, an all-night diner on C Street. But the timeline of her movements became increasingly murky. Sometime after leaving Leroy's, Shelly's fate took a tragic turn. The next morning, two female hikers were walking along the Seward Highway when something caught their eye down an embankment near the train tracks. What they initially thought might be discarded trash or debris turned out to be something far more horrifying. Lying motionless in the snow, they found the body of Shelly Connelly. Her petite frame was partially covered in the fresh snow. The girls immediately alerted the authorities, and soon the Alaska State Troopers were on the scene. They quickly secured the area as investigators from the Alaska Bureau of Investigation arrived. The state medical examiner would later determine that Shelly had suffered a brutal assault before being left in the frigid Alaskan winter. She had been beaten and her body bore the signs of a vicious attack. Ultimately, it was a combination of internal injuries, including a ruptured spleen and exposure to the freezing temperatures that claimed her life. Evidence suggested that after she was assaulted, Shelly had been thrown from a moving car. Her hand became trapped in the door, and the vehicle dragged her some distance before her assailants realized what had happened. When they stopped the car and freed her, they callously discarded her over the side of the embankment, deserting her in the cold of the night. There were faint marks in the snow signs that she had tried to crawl up after being thrown out of the vehicle. Initial efforts focused on piecing together the events leading up to Shelly's tragic demise, including patrons of Chilkoot Charlie's and Leroy's Diner, trying to trace her movements from the night before. Despite numerous interviews and efforts to reconstruct her last hours, the investigation hit a series of ends. The Alaska State Troopers quickly realized that the case would require more advanced forensic techniques. By 1997, with forensic DNA technology becoming a viable tool for solving cases, the Alaska Scientific Crime Detection Laboratory began developing a DNA profile from the biological evidence collected during Shelly's autopsy. This profile aimed to match the unidentified suspect's DNA with known profiles in Cody's. In 2003, the DNA profile from Shelly's case was uploaded into Cody's. Even with this step forward in the right direction, there was no match found, and the investigation remained at a standstill. The case was reopened and evidence re-examined multiple times throughout the years, yielding no new leads. It was not until 2019 that investigators finally got a break in the cold case. In early 2019, the Alaska State Troopers Cold Case Unit turned to genetic genealogy for new insights. This innovative forensic technique involved submitting a DNA profile from the crime scene to Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based company specializing in DNA analysis and genealogy. Parabon Nanolabs compared the DNA profile from Shelly's case to profiles in public genealogical databases, such as GEDmatch. They identified a man named Donald F. McQuaid as a person of interest based on genetic connections to the DNA profile. The results indicated that McQuaid, who was 21 years old at the time of Shelly's slaying, was a likely suspect. Following this identification, Alaska State Troopers conducted a thorough investigation to confirm the link. They obtained a DNA sample from McQuaid and compared it with the evidence collected from Shelly's autopsy. The match was conclusive. DNA samples collected from 2 locations on Shelly's body matched McQuaid's DNA profile. The breakthrough led to McQuaid's arrest in September 2019. It was a pivotal moment in the case, bringing renewed hope to Shelly Connelly's family and the community. Shelly's mother, Judy, said that she felt many emotions when she was told that her daughter's perpetrator was finally found. She said, "Happiness that they found him. Sad too. 41 years. So this was totally unexpected." The evidence against McQuaid was compelling. The DNA match firmly linked him to the crime scene, and further investigation verified that he had been in Alaska in 1978, aligning with the timeline of the slaying. The legal proceedings that followed were intensive. McQuaid faced charges of first-degree and second-degree. The case was prosecuted by Assistant Attorneys General Aaron McCarthy and Paige Smothers, who worked diligently to present a thorough case to the court. The prosecution emphasized the severity of the crime and the profound impact on Shelly's family, seeking a sentence that reflected both the gravity of the offense and McQuaid's advanced age. On April 26, 2024, Superior Court Judge Andrew Peterson sentenced McQuaid to 50 years in prison for the slaying of Shelly Connelly. In his sentencing remarks, Judge Peterson underscored the seriousness of the crime and the long-awaited justice for Shelly and her family. He noted that while McQuaid had lived a full life and seen his children grow up, Shelly's family had been denied those years with her. The sentencing was an emotional moment for the Connelly family, who had waited over 4 decades for this resolution. They expressed a mixture of relief and sorrow, knowing that while justice had been served, it could never fully compensate for the loss of Shelly. Shelly's mom Judy said, "Whatever the new technology is, I am just so glad that it came around and it solved this crime, and hopefully it will solve other crimes for different unsolved cases." In 1986, Ruby Doss was discovered strangled in Spokane's East Sprague area in Washington, leaving investigators with a cold case that seemed destined to remain unsolved. Over the years, the similarities between her case and a series of other unsolved slayings led to numerous false leads and ends. It appeared that justice for Ruby might never come, until a breakthrough in an unrelated unexpectedly brought new evidence to light, reigniting the search for her perpetrator. Ruby J. Doss was a 27-year-old woman living in Spokane, Washington in 1986. Originally from Detroit, Ruby had moved to Spokane, seeking new opportunities and a fresh start. Before the crime that would take her life, Ruby had been struggling with various personal hardships, including economic difficulties. To make ends meet, she worked as an escort, a choice that placed her at increased risk in a world already fraught with danger. Despite these hardships, Ruby remained hopeful and resilient, trying to build a better future for herself and her children. Tragically, those dreams would never be fulfilled. On the rainy evening of January 30th, 1986, Ruby J. Doss's life came to a tragic end. Ruby was last seen in the East Sprague area of Spokane, a neighborhood known for its high levels of criminal activity and transient population. As the night wore on, the weather turned colder and wetter, adding to the bleakness of the evening. Ruby's final hours remain unclear, but it is known that she was found in a field near the intersection of Fisk and Ferry, an area that was both secluded and dimly lit. The discovery was made by a transient who stumbled upon her body. Ruby had been strangled, and the brutality of the crime was clear by the evidence left at the scene. Her body was found in a state that indicated a violent struggle. Police arrived at the scene to find Ruby's body showing clear signs of trauma. The investigation quickly focused on the details surrounding her slaying, including the identification of potential witnesses and the collection of evidence from the crime scene. The evidence included fingerprints and DNA, although forensic technology at the time was limited. Initial interviews with potential witnesses and those familiar with Ruby did not bring any substantial leads, leaving investigators grasping for answers. As the investigation progressed, detectives noted troubling similarities between Ruby's case and a series of other unsolved slayings in the Spokane area. Over a span of months in 1986, several women including Mary Ann Turner and Dorothy E. Burdette were found strangled under circumstances that suggested a possible pattern. Mary Ann, a convicted prostitute, was found strangled next to a garage on South Ivory in early November. Dorothy, a 62-year-old woman with no known criminal background, was discovered in High Bridge Park on Christmas Day. The striking similarities in the method used to cut their lives short, particularly the use of strangulation, led investigators to consider whether a single perpetrator could be responsible for all these cases. Even with these connections, the investigation into Ruby's case faced significant obstacles. The conditions of that night, coupled with the sparse evidence and lack of immediate witnesses, made the investigation challenging. The forensic evidence collected was limited, and the technology of the time did not allow for comprehensive DNA analysis, or provided definitive links between the cases. The police explored various theories, including the possibility of a serial perpetrator operating in the region, but were unable to find conclusive evidence to tie the cases together. The lack of significant progress and the absence of new leads gradually caused Ruby's case to grow cold. The investigation continued sporadically, but with each passing year, the chances of solving the case seemed to diminish. The breakthrough in Ruby Das' case came more than 30 years after her brutal slaying, stemming from a seemingly unrelated investigation in a different state. By 2015, advancements in forensic technology had revolutionized the way law enforcement could analyze and match DNA evidence, providing new hope for cold cases. In a separate case, Richard Aguirre, then in his late 50s and a former police officer, was under investigation for an assault that occurred in Franklin County. During this investigation, Aguirre's DNA was collected and entered into the National DNA Database, CODIS. In a stroke of luck, Aguirre's DNA profile was cross-referenced with DNA evidence collected from Ruby's crime scene. This pivotal match was made possible by advancements in DNA technology and the entry of evidence into the database, which had not been feasible at the time of the original investigation. The connection between Aguirre and Ruby's case was solidified when Spokane police obtained a search warrant for Aguirre's home. They collected new evidence, including items that could potentially link him to the crime. The renewed scrutiny and comparison of evidence confirmed that Aguirre was the prime suspect in Ruby's case. The discovery was a game-changer. It not only identified the man responsible for Ruby's demise, but also rekindled hope for the families of other victims who had remained unsolved. After remaining unsolved for nearly 3 decades, Aguirre was arrested in June 2015 for his involvement in the slaying of Ruby Das. The arrest was a major breakthrough for the Spokane police, who had long sought justice for Ruby and her family. Aguirre's trial began with intense scrutiny and high public interest. The prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting the DNA evidence that linked Aguirre to the crime scene. But the trial was not without complications. The defense argued that Aguirre was not in Spokane at the time of the slaying, pointing to his military records and claiming that other DNA evidence found at the scene suggested multiple potential suspects. They contended that Aguirre's successful career as a police officer and his subsequent should be considered in their defense. The trial took a turn when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a mistrial in early 2021. Aguirre's case was retried in 2023, and he chose to waive his right to a jury trial. He opted instead for a bench trial where Spokane County Superior Court Judge Jeremy Schmidt would decide his fate. The second trial concluded with Aguirre being found guilty of first degree on December 26, 2023. The verdict came as a relief to Ruby Das' family, who had endured years of uncertainty and grief. On March 5, 2024, Richard Aguirre was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The sentence handed down by Judge Schmidt. Schmidt noted the brutal nature of the crime and the enduring pain experienced by Ruby's family, acknowledging that no sentence could truly fill the void left by Ruby's loss. Aguirre's defense attorney argued for a reduced sentence, emphasizing Aguirre's age at the time of the crime and his later contributions to society. They also talked about the potential vulnerabilities Aguirre would face in prison, given his background as a former law enforcement officer. Ultimately, the judge decided on the maximum allowable sentence under the 1986 laws. The sentencing was a bittersweet closure for Ruby Das' case. While it could not undo the past or fully heal the wounds left by her tragedy, it provided a measure of justice and a sense of resolution for her family. LaShonda Doss Walker, the oldest daughter of Ruby, said, "I am not sure how much he understands that he was such an eraser. He changed the trajectory of my life and my sister's lives in such a major way." LaToya Doss, another one of Ruby Doss' daughters, said, "This is not just a loss for me, it is a generational loss for my future family members." In the quiet town of Charlotte, Michigan, the tragic demise of Roberto Cario remained a mystery for over a decade until his charred remains were discovered in 2015. A crucial DNA breakthrough would reveal a shocking truth that would point fingers at the very people closest to him. Roberto Cario, a 37-year-old from Charlotte, Michigan, had a life full of both personal challenges and illegal troubles before he tragically lost his life in 2002. Roberto had served time in federal prison, though the exact reasons for his incarceration are not widely documented. His life post-release was fraught with difficulties, including strained relationships and ongoing conflicts. He was married to Beverly McCallum. The couple's relationship was reportedly troubled with discord and personal strife. Roberto lived with Beverly and her daughter, Dinion Ducharme, in a home on Horatio Street in Charlotte. In 2002, investigators found a metal footlocker with the remains of a human. The remains were extensively burned, making initial identification difficult. Despite the evidence of the brutal slaying, including the presence of a hammer, pieces of a wooden baseball bat, and remnants of a plastic bag and rope, authorities struggled to piece together the full story. Forensic teams collected physical evidence from the crime scene, but the investigation initially brought forward very few leads. The investigation continued for years, with detectives diligently following leads and exploring various theories. Even with the extensive work, the case remained unsolved, and the identity of the victim was not known until several years later. The breakthrough in the case came in 2015, more than a decade after the slaying. Dinion Ducharme, who was serving a life sentence for first degree, reached out to authorities and provided crucial information implicating her mother, Beverly McCallum, and Christopher McMillan. This new information prompted a reinvestigation into the case. Advanced forensic techniques, including DNA analysis, were used to confirm the identity of Roberto and link the suspects to the crime. The information from Ducharme led to the identification of Roberto's remains and connected the suspects to the crime scene evidence. In May 2002, the basement of Roberto Cario's home in Charlotte, Michigan became the scene of a brutal crime. He was lured into the basement by his wife and her daughter. Accompanied by Christopher McMillan, the group had planned the violent attack, where her daughter struck him in the head with a hammer. Beverly then took over again, hitting Roberto repeatedly with the hammer until it became lodged in his head. Afterward, they suffocated him with a plastic bag and a rope. The body was then placed into a metal footlocker, driven to a remote location in Ottawa County, and set afire with gasoline. The remains were partially burned and left inside the locker, concealed in a blueberry field. In 2019, Christopher McMillan, a crucial figure in the case, was arrested and charged with second-degree and conspiracy to commit the slaying. McMillan, who had initially cooperated with authorities, provided pivotal testimony that implicated Beverly McCallum and Dinion Ducharme in the 2002 slaying of Roberto Cario. As part of a plea deal, McMillan pleaded guilty to his charges. His cooperation was essential in detailing the events of May 2002, including the brutal assault on Roberto and the subsequent disposal of his body. McMillan would eventually be sentenced to 15 to 40 years in prison. Beverly McCallum's arrest came a year later in 2020 in Italy, where she had been living under the radar since the crime. She was extradited to Michigan in 2022. Despite McCallum's claims of innocence and her defense attorney's arguments that she was merely an accomplice, the jury found her guilty of second degree in April 2024. She was sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison for the crime and an additional 10 to 15 years for disinterment and mutilation of a body. McCallum received credit for 1,500 days served, including her detention in Italy. Her sentencing concluded the long-running investigation, bringing a measure of justice to the case and closure for the victim's family. For decades, the search for Tommy Lee Hill seemed like a fruitless end. Convicted of heinous crimes spanning 3 states and vanishing from federal custody due to a clerical error, Hill remained elusive until a single tip from a determined survivor changed everything. Tommy Lee Hill's criminal activities, which began in the 1960s, cast a long and dark shadow over the lives of his victims and the communities he touched. He committed some of the most atrocious crimes imaginable by assaulting children and was convicted of a string of crimes in Michigan and Indiana. His crimes even included assaulting his young stepdaughters and assault with intent to harm, burglary, firearms, and counterfeiting. One crime he committed was against his 12-year-old stepdaughter, Irma Shaw. He was sent from Terre Haute, Indiana jails, to Grand Rapids to be sentenced for the crime, when during his sentencing, he told authorities he was thirsty. He entered the women's bathroom and escaped through a window into a getaway car. In 1979, Hill was convicted of serious crimes in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but his legal sentence was never served. On the same day he was to be sentenced, Hill managed a daring escape from custody due to a clerical error. He would go on to commit even more crimes in Pennsylvania. For years, Hill remained a fugitive, adopting new identities and locations to evade capture. A reward of $7,000 was offered for information through an anonymous tip site, but years went by with no leads and the case went cold. At the heart of the case was Irma Shaw, a key figure in the pursuit of justice. Irma had been a victim of Hill's crimes, and she was driven by a deep sense of unresolved trauma and an unwavering commitment to see Hill held accountable. Her quest was not just about seeking justice for herself, but also about advocating for others affected by Hill's actions. Irma Shaw's pursuit of Hill took a turn in 2017 when an anonymous tip came in. A woman called saying she remembered seeing Hill with his car broken down on the side of the highway in Pittsburgh in the 1970s. This tip reignited the investigation, with leading officer Joe Garrett of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force re-examining the case. Garrett, working alongside Irma, employed genealogical evidence and investigative techniques to track Hill's new identity in Pennsylvania. Their investigation revealed in June 2024 that Hill had been slain in 1983 by an individual seeking retribution for the harm Hill had inflicted. While this did not provide the opportunity for Hill to face justice in court, it offered a form of closure to those affected by his actions. Irma Shaw's tragic experience with Hill and her subsequent quest for justice shows the impact of trauma and the importance of perseverance. The case of Tommy Lee Hill is a powerful reminder of the dedication required to solve cold cases and the importance of justice, even when it comes many years after the fact. Danielle Houchins, born in 1981 to her mother, Cheryl Houchins, was affectionately known as Danny. From a young age, Danny was the apple of her mother's eye, and the bond between them was unbreakable. On September 21, 1996, 15-year-old Danielle left her home in Belgrade, Montana, with plans to spend the day fishing at Cameron Bridge Fishing Access, a popular spot she often visited. It was supposed to be a peaceful, solitary escape, just another quiet day by the water. However, what began as a routine outing soon spiraled into a harrowing mystery when Danielle failed to return home. Later that day, searchers discovered her truck parked near the fishing access. The vehicle was left unlocked with no immediate signs of struggle, but there was no trace of Danielle herself. Hours passed, and as daylight waned, the search intensified, driven by growing fears for her safety. Tragically, those fears were realized when Danielle's lifeless body was found several hours later, face down in shallow water, not far from where her truck was discovered. The evidence of assault was undeniable, and the manner of her demise was as horrific as it was heartbreaking. Her final moments had been spent in terror, as her attacker brutally forced her head down into the marshy ground. As investigators pieced together the tragic events, it became evident that Danielle had been suffocated, with her head held down until she choked to her end on the mud. Who was responsible for taking Danielle Huchin's life? For nearly 28 years, this question remained unanswered. Despite the case going cold, the sheriff's office refused to let it slip into oblivion. In 2019, they reopened the investigation, hopeful that advancements in forensic science might finally bring closure to this tragic chapter. The preserved evidence from Danielle's case was sent to a state-of-the-art forensics lab in California, where it was meticulously analyzed. The DNA was compared against the FBI's codes, but no matches were found. Though this was a discouraging outcome, investigators remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. They turned to a new and promising tool, genetic genealogy. With a court order, they accessed the extensive DNA databases, hoping to find a match that codes could not provide. This bold move paid off when a DNA match was found, leading investigators to Paul Hutchinson, a 55-year-old man living in Dillon, Montana. In July 2024, investigators approached Hutchinson at his home, confronting him with questions about Danielle's case. The interaction was tense, and Hutchinson's nervous and erratic behavior raised suspicions. His demeanor suggested he was hiding something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Just hours after the interview, on August 9, 2024, Hutchinson took his own life, abruptly ending the possibility of a full confession. Despite his untimely demise, the case was not closed. Shortly thereafter, forensic analysts confirmed that the DNA evidence from Danielle's case was an undeniable match to Hutchinson. The long-awaited breakthrough had finally come, but it arrived with a mix of relief and sorrow. His family, unaware of his past, was left devastated by the revelation. For 22 years, he had 2 kids, a daughter around the age of 20 and a younger son. He was a graduate student at Montana State and had only been in the area a short period at the time he took Danny's life. While the confirmation of his guilt brought a sense of resolution to Danielle's family, it also underscored the profound impact of a crime that had gone unsolved for so many years. Said, "Even though this man will not face a jury of his peers, I have no doubt he was the one who forcefully and violently assaulted my sister. When the time came to face up and account for his violence, he instead chose to end his life. He knew of his guilt and could not face my family or his family and the pain he caused. After nearly 28 years without answers, without justice, we celebrate today." Stephanie says 28 years is far too long and she had to fight far too hard to find justice for her 15-year-old sister. She also said, "Montanans, Danielle's story should anger you, should make you think about your mothers, your sisters, your wives, and your daughters. Should make you think about everything you would do to protect and honor the women you love." The wife of Paul Hutchinson, Christy, has issued the following statement. "We are absolutely heartbroken to learn this news, and our hearts go out to the Hutchins family. It is good to know that they will at last be able to find the closure that they deserve. Our own family was already reeling from dealing with Paul ending his own life. In 24 years of marriage, there was never any hint that something like this could be lurking in the background. Paul was an exceptional husband and father. This latest news makes our grieving so much more complicated. We would appreciate being given the space to process and come to terms with this development as we mourn. The investigation into Danny's case is closed. However, law enforcement is still looking into Paul Hutchinson's life and possible connections to other cold cases." Melissa Patton was born on September 9, 1977, to Carl and Norma Patton. Growing up just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, she shared a close bond with her older sister, Tina. Melissa's personality was infectious. She was often described by her loved ones as bubbly, kind, and trusting. After high school, she married her longtime boyfriend, Christopher Wolfenbarger, and the couple relocated to a different part of Atlanta. Their union was blessed with 2 children, a son named Joey and a daughter named Chrissy. Melissa thrived as a devoted wife and mother, embracing her role with joy and dedication. The last known contact Melissa had with her parents occurred on Thanksgiving Day in 1998. During a phone call from Christopher's grandparents' home, she discussed plans for Christmas, leaving her family with the impression that everything was normal, and later missed her mother's birthday in February 1999. Her parents' worry turned into alarm. Norma decided to take matters into her own hands and traveled to Melissa's home, only to be met with disturbing news from the neighbors. The Wolfenbargers had mysteriously moved away shortly after Christmas, leaving no trace of their whereabouts. Christopher, Melissa's husband, never filed a missing person report for her, nor did he inform her family of her sudden absence. His silence was deafening, especially considering his documented history of domestic violence against Melissa. The fact that he did not reach out to her family further fueled their fears and suspicions. For Norma, Christopher's actions, or lack thereof, raised chilling questions about what had really happened to her daughter. On April 29, 1999, a gruesome discovery was made in a wooded area along Avon Avenue near Hartford Avenue. Inside a garbage bag discarded in a dumpster was the severed and bleached head of a woman. Just over a month later, on June 3rd, more dismembered remains belonging to the same woman were found. These remains, carefully packed in black trash bags and discarded in another dumpster, were missing the torso. Investigators noted that the dismemberment appeared to have been done with a saw, suggesting a methodical and brutal disposal of the body. The locations where the remains were found raised particular interest among investigators. They were alarmingly close to a glass company where Christopher Wolfenbarger, Melissa's husband, had been employed in the late 1990s. This connection was more than a coincidence. After being suspected of stealing a reciprocal saw, a tool that could easily have been used in the dismemberment of the body, the proximity of the dump sites to his former workplace and his history of theft added a chilling layer to the investigation. As authorities dug deeper, the pieces began to fit together in a disturbing way. The careful dismemberment and the bleaching of the head pointed to a perpetrator who had both the tools and the knowledge to carry out such a heinous act. While the identification of the remains had not yet been confirmed, the proximity to Christopher's past workplace and the nature of the crime created a dark cloud of suspicion over him. In 2003, a significant breakthrough emerged in the haunting case of Melissa Patton's disappearance, when authorities successfully identified the dismembered remains as hers through advanced DNA testing. This pivotal identification hinged on a DNA sample from her father, Carl Patton, who had recently been arrested for a string of unrelated crimes. The discovery not only provided a grim closure to Melissa's family, but also unveiled a sinister facet of Carl's past that had long remained hidden. Between 1973 and 1977, Carl was responsible for the slayings of 5 individuals across Georgia, 3 of which were part of the infamous Flint River slayings. These cases had baffled law enforcement for years, remaining unsolved mysteries until the DNA evidence linked Carl to them. As the investigation deepened, Carl pleaded guilty to 4 of these cases in March 2003 and the 5th in May of the same year. His confessions led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole, sealing his fate behind bars and bringing some measure of justice for his victims. Initially, the revelation of Carl's brutal past led investigators to suspect him in the disappearance and slaying of his own daughter, Melissa. However, further scrutiny and evidence established that Carl had been incarcerated well before Melissa vanished, effectively eliminating him as a suspect in her case. This development was both a relief and a new source of anguish for the Patton family, as it meant that the true perpetrator remained at large. With Carl cleared of any involvement, the focus of the investigation shifted back to Christopher Wolfenbarger, Melissa's estranged husband. Despite the red flags, law enforcement struggled to gather the concrete evidence necessary to press charges against him, leaving Christopher as the sole suspect without formal accusations. In 2024, the police, determined to bring closure to the cold case, re-examined the evidence with fresh eyes and new forensic techniques. These developments finally pointed decisively towards Christopher Wolfenbarger, Melissa's estranged husband, as the prime suspect in her slaying. On a hot summer day in August, law enforcement moved swiftly to apprehend Christopher at his home in Griffin, Georgia. The arrest itself was as bizarre as it was telling. Christopher was found desperately trying to evade capture by hiding behind a dryer in his residence. This attempt to conceal himself only reinforced the suspicion that he had something to hide. The officers wasted no time in taking him into custody, marking a pivotal moment in the long and painful journey toward justice for Melissa. On August 6, 2024, Christopher was formally charged with taking the life of Melissa. At the press conference, Detective Shepard, who took over the case several years ago, said Christopher had been a person of interest from the beginning, and that probable cause is how they were able to finally make the arrest. When asked what specifically linked Christopher to the slaying, he said, "I want to protect the integrity of the case going forward, so I cannot disclose certain evidence, but we look at everything when it comes to a cold case." For her family, the arrest brought a bittersweet sense of vindication. The man they had long suspected was finally being held accountable, but it also meant revisiting the trauma of their loss. Norma Patton, Melissa's mother, said, "We have finally made it. He is in custody, and now we just need to get over the last hurdle and get him convicted. You do not know what the final straw was that caused him to do what he did to her. He is the only one who has the real answers." She said her last words to her daughter was, "I love you, and you know where I am if you need me." Norma said the following about her serial perpetrator husband. He had been devastated when he found out her life had been taken, but he was deliriously happy as soon as he found out Chris had been arrested. Tina, Melissa's sister, said she knew it was Christopher. She said, "From day one, we knew it was Christopher. There was never ever any doubt in our minds who did this. My mom said when she first met him, there was just evil in his eyes. That is so true." For Melissa, she did not deserve what she got, and I hope anybody who is in a domestic violence situation, please get out. In 1987, a 19-year-old woman became pregnant, a momentous event that should have been marked by joy, but the circumstances surrounding it were anything but clear. Details about her life during this time remain obscure, leaving many questions unanswered. Was the pregnancy a result of a relationship, or were there more complex factors at play? The lack of information has only added to the sense of mystery and tragedy that would soon unfold. In October 1987, a man rummaging through a dumpster for recyclables behind a business on the 5400 block of La Sierra Avenue in Riverside, California, made a horrifying discovery. Hidden among the trash was the lifeless body of a newborn baby girl. The Riverside County Coroner's Office conducted a thorough examination and quickly ruled that the newborn's life was taken. Despite the best efforts of the Riverside Police Department's detectives, the investigation hit a wall. They followed every lead, interviewed potential witnesses, and scoured for evidence. But the identity of the baby's mother or anyone involved remained elusive. As the years passed, the case grew cold. The Riverside Police Department's cold case unit made a pivotal decision in 2020, one that would eventually lead to justice for a crime that had been unsolved for over 3 decades. Determined to resolve the case of the unidentified baby girl found in 1987, detectives joined forces with the Riverside County Regional Cold Case Team and the nonprofit organization Season of Justice. This collaboration was driven by the hope that new forensic technologies, especially advanced DNA analysis, could finally identify the mother of the deceased infant. Their dedication paid off. When the DNA evidence eventually led them to a name, Melissa Jean Allen Avila. After years of uncertainty, the mother of the baby was finally identified, but the case was far from over. Authorities needed to locate Avila, who had since moved across the country. On August 7, 2024, the long search came to an end when Avila, now a 55-year-old resident of Shelby, North Carolina, was apprehended. Her arrest was the result of coordinated efforts between the U.S. Marshals Pacific Southwest Regional Fugitive Task Force and the U.S. Marshals Carolinas Regional Fugitive Task Force. Following her arrest, Avila was extradited back to Riverside County, California, the place where the tragic events of 1987 had unfolded. She now faced charges for taking the life of her newborn baby girl. Now facing the weight of long-delayed justice, was booked into the Larry D. Smith Correctional Facility. A stark contrast to the years of freedom she had lived, despite the dark shadow of her past. With bail set at $1.1 million, the severity of the charges against her was unmistakably clear. The court will soon hear the evidence that ties Avila to the slaying of her newborn daughter, with DNA analysis playing a pivotal role in the prosecution's case. Wayne Pratt, a 24-year-old man, worked as a gas station operator at the Enco gas station located along U.S. Highway 41 in Winnebago, Wisconsin, about 60 miles southwest of Green Bay. Known for his kind-hearted nature, Wayne was deeply loved by those around him, especially by his wife, Marie Pratt, to whom he was a devoted and caring husband. The night of June 12, 1963, would mark a tragic and unforeseen twist in his life. On that fateful evening, the ordinary rhythm of Wayne's existence was shattered, setting off a chain of events that would leave his family and community in shock. What began as just another day at the gas station quickly turned into a night filled with fear and uncertainty, changing the course of Wayne's life forever. As the evening progressed, the quiet town of Winnebago was unaware that something terrible was about to unfold at the Enco station. That evening, Wayne Pratt had been at home, relaxing and watching TV. It was an ordinary night until around 8:40 p.m. when the sound of a car pulling up to the gas station interrupted his evening. Always diligent and ready to help, Wayne stepped outside and walked toward the station, assuming that the driver needed gas or assistance. He had no reason to suspect that this encounter would be anything other than routine. As time passed and Wayne did not return home, his wife, Marie, grew increasingly anxious. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours and her concern deepened. Unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong, Marie decided to head to the gas station herself, hoping to find Wayne busy with a late customer. However, nothing could have prepared her for the horror she was about to uncover. Upon arriving at the Enco gas station, which was usually bustling with activity, Marie found the scene eerily quiet. Her heart pounded as she entered the building, and her worst fears were realized when she discovered Wayne's lifeless body in the back room. He was covered with a blanket, a shocking sight that made the grim reality all too real. The man she loved and had spent her life with was gone. Overcome with grief and disbelief, Marie immediately called the police, her voice trembling as she reported the tragedy. When authorities arrived, Marie recounted the harrowing details of how she had found her husband. As the investigation into Wayne Pratt's slaying began, the full extent of the brutality he suffered became chillingly clear. Wayne had been stabbed 53 times, a horrifying act of violence that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The sheer number of wounds indicated a level of rage and personal animosity that made the crime all the more perplexing. Yet, despite the gruesome nature of the attack, there was a glimmer of hope in the form of evidence left behind. Blood that did not belong to Wayne. This discovery suggested that Wayne's assailant had also been injured during the violent struggle. The presence of the attacker's blood at the scene provided investigators with a crucial lead, hinting that the person responsible had left behind a trace of their identity. However, despite this promising clue, the investigation quickly encountered significant challenges. No further details about how the events unfolded that night could be uncovered, leaving many questions unanswered. As the months turned into years, the trail grew colder. Investigators exhausted every lead, but the case remained frustratingly stagnant. With no arrests made and no new evidence coming to light, Wayne Pratt's case began to slip from the forefront of public attention. The case, once a priority, slowly transitioned into a cold case, as the initial burst of investigative activity failed to yield any significant breakthroughs. By the time the late 1960s arrived, the investigation had stalled almost entirely. With limited resources and no new leads, law enforcement had little choice but to scale back their efforts. In 2011, nearly 5 decades after Wayne's life was brutally taken, the case was reopened as investigators sought to leverage advancements in forensic science to find new leads. With DNA technology now more sophisticated, the hope was that re-examining the evidence might finally reveal the identity of Wayne's perpetrator. Investigators focused on the blanket found covering Wayne's body, knowing that any genetic material left behind could provide the breakthrough they needed. By 2015, their efforts seemed to be paying off. Sorensen Forensics, a leading forensic testing company, identified DNA mixtures on the blanket, a promising development that brought new life to the investigation. However, the mixed nature of the DNA samples complicated matters, preventing authorities from entering the information into national databases to search for a match. The investigation stalled once again as the inability to isolate a clear profile left investigators at a frustrating standstill. 3 years later, however, the case took a significant turn. In 2018, a warrant was issued for the arrest of William Dockstader, an 82-year-old man from Bowler, Wisconsin. Dockstader had been on the radar of investigators since 1963, when he was initially identified as a suspect in the days following Wayne's demise. Tips about his potential involvement resurfaced in 1968 and again in 2022, keeping him in the periphery of the investigation for decades. But it was not until 2023 that new DNA technology provided the evidence needed to conclusively link Dockstader to the crime. In 2023, Sorensen Forensics re-examined the DNA evidence using the latest technology, while cybergenetics employed true allele data analysis to sift through the complex DNA mixtures. The analysis revealed on July 16, 2024, that Dockstader's DNA was statistically identical to the DNA found on the blanket that covered Wayne's body. This breakthrough, though bittersweet, finally provided the answer that investigators, Wayne's family, and the community had sought for over 61 years. Though William Dockstader had passed away in 2022 at the age of 82, the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office officially closed the cold case. The Winnebago County District Attorney's Office reviewed the evidence and confirmed that, had Dockstader been alive, there would have been sufficient grounds to charge him with slaying. The resolution of the case brought a measure of closure to a decades-old mystery, even as the memory of Wayne Pratt's tragic demise continued to resonate with those who had lived through it.